The brilliant, unyielding mid-morning sunlight was cascading through the massive, arched windows of my thriving artisanal bakery, illuminating the airborne flour like millions of dancing, golden fireflies, when the absolute destruction of my reality arrived in the form of a mundane, automated email notification from our private wealth management firm. For an agonizing, suspended eternity, the comforting, familiar sounds of the bustling daytime kitchen, the rhythmic hum of the massive dough mixers, the cheerful, staccato chatter of my dedicated pastry chefs, the warm, inviting hiss of the espresso machines out in the main cafe, seemed to completely vanish, replaced by a deafening, hollow ringing in my ears as I stared at the high-resolution screen of my laptop, my trembling eyes locking onto a meticulously categorized ledger that revealed a truth so monstrous it felt physically impossible. My husband, the man whose tearful, impassioned vows of eternal loyalty had anchored my soul for the past 8 years, had been systematically, cold-bloodedly siphoning the massive profit margins of my rapidly expanding culinary empire to single-handedly finance the luxurious, extravagant lifestyle of his former fiancée. If you believe in the unyielding, miraculous power of the human spirit to rise from the ashes of unimaginable betrayal, if you know firsthand what it means to rebuild your life from the absolute foundation after someone you trusted with your life tries to tear it down, and if you hold fast to the enduring, beautiful values of kindness, forgiveness, radical hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who desperately needs a profound beacon of strength today, and subscribe to our channel so our incredible community can continue sharing these deeply emotional, life-changing journeys together. I sat completely paralyzed in my comfortable, ergonomic office chair, the vibrant, sun-drenched energy of my flagship store buzzing happily just beyond the glass walls of my private office, providing a stark, surreal, and incredibly cruel contrast to the cold, silent, suffocating horror that was rapidly expanding within my chest, making it nearly impossible to draw a full breath. My name is Genevieve, and long before I had become a celebrated, award-winning culinary entrepreneur with multiple thriving locations across the state, I had been a woman who believed fiercely, perhaps naively, in the transformative power of redemption and the healing, absolute nature of unconditional love, a deeply held belief that had led me straight into the open, waiting arms of Harrison, a charismatic, intelligent, but deeply wounded man who had come into my life carrying the heavy, visible, agonizing scars of a brutal financial and emotional bankruptcy directly caused by his previous, volatile relationship with a woman named Cordelia. When Harrison and I had first met during a bright, incredibly sunny afternoon at a mutual friend's lavish outdoor garden party, he had been a hollowed-out shell of a man, drowning in insurmountable legal debt and completely, utterly broken by Cordelia's callous, unceremonious abandonment when his initial startup company had tragically failed, and I, driven by a profound, overwhelming empathy and a foolish, romantic desire to be his ultimate savior, had slowly, patiently, and tirelessly helped him rebuild his shattered self-worth, eventually paying off his crushing legal fees from my own meager early savings, securing the massive commercial loan for our beautiful, sprawling suburban estate entirely under my own pristine credit, and pouring every waking, sunlit hour into building my bakery firm so that we could both eventually enjoy a life of absolute privilege, security, and unbothered comfort. He had always been so incredibly attentive, so performatively supportive, always bringing me fresh, iced matcha lattes during my long, grueling morning strategy meetings, always loudly praising my relentless, unmatched work ethic to our wealthy social circle, yet as I continued to scroll down the endless, damning list of obscure, hidden wire transfers, the devastating, undeniable reality became impossible to ignore or rationalize. He was actively, intentionally using the very culinary success I had achieved through years of sweat and tears to financially support the exact woman who had once gleefully destroyed him. The terrifying depth of the deception was absolutely staggering, revealing a meticulously organized, highly sophisticated campaign of ongoing financial infidelity that had been operating silently right beneath my nose for the better part of 14 months, cleverly disguised as ambiguous, generic vendor payments, obscure equipment maintenance fees, and miscellaneous international consulting retainers that he, in his trusted, unmonitored role as the part-time financial logistics manager of my rapidly growing firm, had quietly authorized during the chaotic, intensely busy midday lunch rushes when he knew for an absolute fact that I would be entirely too preoccupied with managing client catering pitches and overseeing the chaotic kitchen line to ever notice a few misplaced zeros. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped, panicked bird, sending frantic, electric pulses of raw adrenaline through my veins as I clicked with a shaking finger on a specific, massive transaction dated just 3 weeks prior, a bright, beautiful, exceptionally sunny Tuesday when I had been physically away across the county, touring a massive new potential commercial site for our next expansion. The hidden ledger showed a staggering, 5-figure transfer of liquid funds, perfectly, exactly matching the enormous, exorbitant cost of the exclusive, high-end fashion design incubator program in Milan that I had just seen Cordelia shamelessly boasting about on her very public, highly curated social media profiles. The physical nausea was sudden, violent, and completely overwhelming, a visceral, bodily reaction to the sickening realization that while I was standing in a dusty, unfinished commercial construction zone under the baking, relentless afternoon sun, pouring my absolute heart and soul into securing our family's long-term financial future, the man I loved with every fiber of my being was sitting comfortably in the pristine, air-conditioned executive office I had built specifically for him, casually funneling my life's work across the ocean to ensure that the woman he loudly claimed to absolutely despise could live out her wildest, most extravagant, unearned dreams without ever having to lift a single, manicured finger. It was not merely the staggering loss of the hard-earned capital that tore violently at my soul, it was the profound, suffocating, world-altering realization that my entire, beautiful marriage was a hollow, parasitic, incredibly cruel illusion, a carefully constructed, elaborate stage play where I was nothing more than the unwitting, exhaustless, highly profitable benefactor unknowingly funding his unresolved, pathetic obsession with a woman who had never, ever truly left his fractured heart. A heavy, absolute, almost frightening clarity began to slowly settle over my panicked mind, a chilling, supernatural calmness that forcefully pushed the rising, hysterical panic deep down into a tight, hard, unyielding knot in my stomach, rapidly replacing my profound, shattering grief with a sharp, lethal, entirely protective instinct to immediately secure the massive financial fortress I had built with my own 2 flour-dusted hands before he could manage to siphon another single, hard-earned dime. I knew Harrison's narcissistic, manipulative personality flawlessly, understanding exactly, down to the very syllable, how he would react if I confronted him right then and there with hysterical tears, desperate screaming, and wild, emotional accusations. He would deploy his considerable, weaponized charm, he would feign profound, insulted ignorance. He would expertly twist the entire narrative to make it seem as though he were simply making a highly complex, risky international investment on my behalf that I simply didn't possess the business acumen to understand, or far worse, he would weaponize his past trauma, crying large, fake tears and claiming that Cordelia was ruthlessly extorting him with some fabricated secret and that he was only trying to bravely protect our beautiful, innocent family from her vindictive, destructive nature. I absolutely refused to give him the opportunity to gaslight me in the bright light of day. I refused to allow him the space to manipulate my deep empathy one last, final time, and so, bathed in the bright, unforgiving, illuminating light of the mid-morning sun pouring through my office window, I began the meticulous, agonizing, incredibly tedious work of documenting every single fraudulent, hidden transfer, taking dozens of high-resolution, time-stamped screenshots, downloading 7 years of complex, joint bank statements, and compiling a digital, encrypted dossier so comprehensive, so incredibly detailed, and so absolutely airtight that no amount of his silver-tongued, pathetic excuses could ever hope to dismantle it in a court of law. With every single damning file I securely encrypted, password-protected, and forwarded to my completely private, off-site server that he knew absolutely nothing about, the deep, abiding, unconditional love I had nurtured and protected for him for nearly a decade began to rapidly calcify, turning into a cold, impenetrable, absolute armor of steel that shielded my breaking, bleeding heart from the agonizing, paralyzing reality of his ultimate betrayal. I immediately picked up my cell phone and dialed my senior, highly aggressive wealth manager, a brilliant, terrifying, no-nonsense woman named Rosalind, instructing her with a remarkably steady, entirely emotionless voice to immediately execute an emergency, total financial lockdown protocols on everything bearing my name or the name of my company, severing Harrison's access to every single business operating account, freezing our massive, joint savings, instantly suspending the high-limit platinum credit lines, and instantly, permanently revoking his authorization on the massive, high-yield investment portfolios I had carefully cultivated long before his tragic, broke self had ever entered my successful life. Rosalind, instantly hearing the cold, unyielding steel in my voice and understanding the absolute gravity of the terrifying situation without needing a lengthy, tearful explanation, moved with astonishing, ruthless speed, and within 45 minutes, while the warm, beautiful daytime sun continued its slow, steady, indifferent climb toward a brilliant noon, the absolute financial guillotine fell heavily and decisively, effectively severing Harrison's parasitic lifeline and leaving him entirely, permanently shut out of the massive empire I had built from scratch. The long afternoon stretched ahead of me, bright, clear, and terrifyingly vast, as I quietly, methodically packed my essential, personal belongings into a sleek, leather travel bag, moving systematically through the beautiful, sunlit executive suite of my bakery's corporate office, a beautiful space I had designed specifically to reflect the massive success we were supposed to share and enjoy together into our old age. I did not shed a single, solitary tear as I carefully removed the heavy, silver-framed photograph of us smiling brightly on a sun-drenched, sandy beach in the Mediterranean during our 5th anniversary, placing it face down in the bottom of the wastebasket, knowing now with absolute, sickening certainty that the luxurious, incredibly expensive vacation had likely been nothing more than a highly convenient, elaborate cover for him to discreetly wire more of my hard-earned profits into Cordelia's untraceable offshore accounts while I was happily distracted by the breathtaking ocean views and the warm sun on my face. I calmly, politely instructed my dedicated administrative assistant to immediately cancel all my afternoon catering appointments and client meetings, simply citing a sudden, unavoidable family emergency, and I walked out of the gleaming, pristine glass doors of my firm, stepping boldly into the warm, vibrant, incredibly beautiful afternoon air, feeling a strange, paradoxical, entirely overwhelming sense of absolute, terrifying liberation warring viciously with the crushing, heavy weight of a massive, long-term marriage that had just violently died right in my very hands. I drove my car carefully across the bustling, sunlit, vibrant city to a quiet, highly exclusive boutique hotel nestled right next to the sprawling, beautiful botanical gardens, checking into a serene, light-filled, incredibly private corner suite that offered a sweeping, majestic view of the lush, green daytime canopy, a stark, beautiful, and highly necessary contrast to the suffocating, ugly emotional debris I had just decisively left behind. It was there, sitting alone by the expansive, floor-to-ceiling window with a cup of hot, soothing chamomile tea resting in my slightly trembling hands, that my cell phone finally erupted into a massive symphony of frantic, vibrating, continuous alerts, the bright screen lighting up continuously with Harrison's name as he undoubtedly stood at the register of some high-end, luxury auto dealership or exclusive boutique, attempting to put down a massive deposit on something frivolous, only to discover in front of a crowd that every single premium card he possessed had been ruthlessly, embarrassingly, and permanently declined by the bank. He left a rapid, terrifying series of breathless, escalating, panicked voice messages, his tone shifting rapidly and wildly from mild, slightly embarrassed confusion as he loudly apologized to some poor salesman in the background, to a rising, panicked, frantic urgency as he begged me to immediately call the bank and fix what he arrogantly assumed was a massive, embarrassing administrative error on my part, completely, entirely oblivious to the terrifying fact that his elaborate, parasitic, incredibly cruel double life had finally been violently, permanently exposed to the harsh, unforgiving light of day. I sat perfectly still in the quiet, sun-drenched hotel room, listening to the frantic, desperate cadence of his voice echoing from the speaker, realizing with a sickening, absolute certainty that his rising panic had absolutely nothing to do with a fear of losing my love, losing our marriage, or hurting my feelings, and entirely, completely everything to do with the sheer, unadulterated terror of losing his limitless funding, his prestigious social standing as a wealthy business owner's husband. And his ability to continue playing the pathetic role of a wealthy, magnanimous benefactor to a woman who had never, ever truly respected him in the first place. When he finally, inevitably logged into our mobile banking application and saw with his own eyes that he had been entirely, comprehensively locked out of every single account, the notifications rapidly shifted from voice messages to an aggressive barrage of desperate, demanding, furious text messages, demanding to know exactly where I was, demanding a comprehensive explanation for my catastrophic, insane overreaction, and demanding that I restore his access immediately before I caused a permanent, irreparable rift in our otherwise perfect marriage. I calmly picked up my phone, my fingers incredibly steady and resolute in the bright afternoon light, and typed a single, highly concise, perfectly punctuated response, informing him that I was fully, comprehensively aware of the massive, ongoing financial transfers to Cordelia, that our marriage was effectively, permanently terminated as of this exact moment in time, that my aggressive legal team would be handling all future communications from this second forward, and that he had until the end of the bright, sunny afternoon to pack his personal belongings and permanently vacate my property before the private security team I had just hired arrived to physically change the locks. The digital silence that followed my message was immense, heavy, and incredibly profound, a massive void that echoed loudly with the complete, devastating, absolute collapse of his carefully constructed, parasitic reality, a silence that marked the exact, precise moment he realized that the capable, empathetic, deeply loving woman he had so foolishly, arrogantly underestimated had finally, permanently removed the blindfold from her eyes. Over the next several grueling, incredibly stressful weeks, all unfolding entirely under the bright, exposing, beautiful light of the long summer days, the massive legal machinery engaged with terrifying speed, and the astonishing, sickening, bottomless depth of his financial infidelity was laid entirely bare in pristine, sunlit legal conference rooms and sterile, wood-paneled mediation offices across the city. Harrison attempted every single conceivable, desperate manipulation in his extensive, toxic arsenal, alternating wildly between sobbing, highly dramatic, tearful pleas for mercy, forgiveness, and understanding in the bright corridors outside the deposition rooms, and furious, vindictive, incredibly cruel accusations of greed and heartlessness when his fake tears utterly failed to elicit even a tiny sliver of sympathy from my newly hardened, heavily guarded heart. He desperately, pathetically claimed that he was only trying to help Cordelia get back on her feet after a bad business deal, that he viewed it as a secret, noble charity project that he was simply too embarrassed to tell me about, that he fully, absolutely intended to pay me back every single cent from his own meager consulting commissions eventually, but the undeniable, documented, massive paper trail proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had been entirely funding her lavish European vacations, her incredibly expensive designer wardrobe, and her high-end, luxurious lifestyle while I was sacrificing my weekends, my sleep, and my physical health to secure the very financial future he was actively, deliberately destroying. Watching the man I had once loved with every fiber of my being utterly unravel in the unforgiving, illuminating, incredibly bright light of the absolute truth was an incredibly painful, complex process, not because I mourned the loss of the pathetic, lying man sitting across from me, but because I deeply mourned the beautiful, innocent, hopeful years I had spent believing in a spectacular, beautiful illusion, pouring my boundless energy, my deep love, and my incredible talent into a bottomless void that was always, inevitably, going to drain me entirely dry. Yet, amidst the grueling legal battles, the invasive, incredibly thorough financial audits, and the sheer, overwhelming emotional exhaustion of dismantling my entire life, I discovered a profound, unshakable, massive wellspring of strength buried incredibly deep within my core, realizing with absolute, stunning clarity that the exact same resilience, intelligence, and relentless determination that had allowed me to build a massive culinary empire from absolutely nothing would be the exact same powerful forces that would carry me safely and victoriously through this agonizing transition. I surrounded myself entirely with a fierce, highly protective circle of brilliant colleagues, dedicated employees, and deeply loyal friends, throwing myself entirely into my culinary projects with a renewed, fiery, unmatched passion, opening beautiful, light-filled community cafes and designing sustainable, empowering programs that brought immense joy, delicious food, and vibrant life to the city around me. I slowly, painstakingly, but surely began to internalize the profound, liberating truth that the massive amounts of money Harrison had stolen was, in the grand, infinite scheme of the universe, just money. It was a severe violation, it was a profound, terrible betrayal of trust, but it was absolutely not the source of my inherent, beautiful worth, my incredible creative genius, or my limitless, miraculous capacity to rebuild a beautiful, meaningful, and incredibly fulfilling life entirely on my own uncompromising terms. As the months passed, the sharp, blinding, terrifying pain of the betrayal began to slowly dull, melting beautifully into a warm, expansive, incredibly bright season of immense personal growth where I actively, purposefully learned to fully forgive myself for not seeing the insidious, hidden truth sooner, understanding deeply that my immense, beautiful capacity to love, to trust, and to heal others was a beautiful, incredibly rare trait, even if it had been temporarily, cruelly exploited by the absolute wrong person. The massive divorce was finally, permanently finalized on a breathtakingly beautiful Tuesday morning, the daytime air incredibly crisp, clear, and full of absolute, limitless possibility, and as I walked boldly out of the heavy, imposing glass doors of the massive courthouse and stepped directly into the bustling, sun-drenched, vibrant city square, I felt the massive, suffocating, heavy chains of the past absolutely shatter and fall entirely away, leaving me feeling infinitely lighter. Completely freer, and more fiercely, unapologetically, beautifully independent than I had ever felt in my entire life. I had successfully, ruthlessly protected the entirety of my business, reclaimed every single financial asset that was rightfully mine, and completely, permanently, irrevocably severed all emotional, physical, and financial ties with the man who had so desperately tried to extinguish my brilliant light. My beautiful journey of healing was absolutely not a perfect, linear path. There were inevitably bright, incredibly sunny afternoons where the sudden, unexpected memory of the betrayal would catch me completely off guard, moments where I would see a happy couple holding hands in a sunlit park and feel a sharp, fleeting, agonizing pang of sorrow for the beautiful, peaceful future I had once so vividly, hopefully imagined for myself. But those incredibly difficult moments grew less and less frequent, rapidly and beautifully replaced by a profound, overwhelming, daily gratitude for the incredible, massive second chance I had bravely, courageously given myself, a deep, abiding, unshakable appreciation for the truly authentic, deeply supportive connections I had cultivated in my new life, and a quiet, unshakable, absolute confidence in my own extraordinary, miraculous ability to survive the darkest storms, thrive in the chaotic aftermath, and absolutely flourish against all conceivable, imaginable odds. I began dedicating a massive, significant portion of my free time to actively mentoring young, ambitious women entering the highly competitive business world, openly, bravely sharing my painful experiences of financial betrayal and emotional manipulation, teaching them the absolute, critical, life-saving importance of protecting their financial assets, maintaining their absolute independence, and always deeply trusting their powerful, intuitive gut feelings, turning my personal, devastating heartbreak into a profound, massive source of empowerment, education, and radiant, beautiful hope for countless others. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before we officially conclude this incredible, deeply emotional journey together, I want to ask you a very important, highly personal question that I deeply hope you will take the time to answer in the comments below. How do you ultimately find the absolute courage to completely rebuild your personal boundaries and deeply trust in your own beautiful intuition after someone you deeply loved has used your kindness and generosity against you? Looking back right now, standing proudly in the very center of a massive, sun-drenched, beautiful culinary training center that I designed and funded entirely on my own, surrounded by vibrant community life, brilliant, warm sunlight, and the tangible, absolute results of my own unyielding, fierce perseverance, I realize with absolute, perfect clarity that the most beautiful, enduring, incredible structures in our lives are often built directly upon the thoroughly cleared wreckage of our greatest mistakes. The immense, agonizing pain of the past has beautifully transformed into the solid, unshakable, perfect foundation for my present, overwhelming joy, and though I walked bravely away from a marriage that very nearly destroyed my spirit, I confidently, proudly walked into a brilliant, limitless, entirely beautiful future where I am the sole, undisputed, powerful author of my own incredible happiness, proving once and for all that true, lasting, absolute wealth is never, ever found in joint bank accounts, but in the unyielding, magnificent strength of a resilient, hopeful, and deeply, courageously forgiving heart.